Hello, hello, and welcome to the Charlotte Mason Enrichment Podcast. My name is Elise Thompson, and I am your host. We come to you every single week to encourage you, to equip you, and to enrich your lives as a Charlotte Mason home educator. Happy New Year. This is one of our first recordings of the New Year 2025, and I am excited as I am every week to come into your home with a power-packed session and just an amazing guest speaker. And so I'm excited to welcome Miss Heather Andrew to the podcast today. Welcome, Heather.
Hi. I'm so glad to be here.
Yay, thanks for being here. So I'm going to read Heather's bio, and then I'm going to tell you who she is to me. Heather Andrew worked in the public school system, teaching pre-K for 15 years, as well as facilitating nurture and mindfulness classes for children who have experienced trauma. She worked for Fairy Dust Teaching for a teacher conventional platform. They're fantastic. Her most important job that she does is that she's a mama of 3 amazing children. They're 15, 11, and 7. And she is also in the final stages of publishing her very first book called School Readiness, A Letter to the Family. So that is her official bio. Heather was my oldest son's K-4 teacher. And so he's my firstborn. So, that teacher gets a very special place. She did a wonderful job nurturing and celebrating who not only my child was, but all the children in her class at that age. Her husband is a firefighter and has just been a personal blessing to our family. And so we're big fans of the Andrew family. And so, again, just really honored and happy to be able to have her on the podcast today.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yay! Okay, so we're going to talk today about the power of play, and that there's more that meets the eye. So when I first was introduced to Charlotte Mason, I went to a book club, and somehow in that book club meeting, we talked about the early years of childhood and education, and I was made aware that it was the belief of Charlotte Mason's that formal lessons should not start until the age of 6. I had never heard that before. And I thought that was the biggest load I'd ever heard in my life. Like, why would you wait till your child is 6 to start school? And so I didn't take that advice, and I started my son at age 4. But I was so glad for with Heather being my son's teacher, because she was took the more approach of a play-based learning. And that just did wonders for my son. And so I thought, man, if I thought that this was kind of a load of crap, I'm sure there's other people that had thought that as well. Hopefully I'm not the only one. But I thought it would be really great if we could kind of unpack why that is so important to give our children time to grow and to develop. And that when we say, hey, go play, that's not just like nothing's happening and they're just keeping themselves entertained, that there's a lot that's happening as they are playing. And so, Heather, tell us about your journey into discovering the wonderful world of play. Like, you went to college, you got your degree in education, and when you go to college, that's not necessarily something that they probably, educated you in. So you probably came to that journey on your own.
Yeah. I went to Oral Roberts University with a background in education, but I minored in early childhood education. So I did have somewhat of a foundation of what developmentally appropriate practices looked like.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was introduced to play-based learning, it rocked my whole world, because I thought I was doing play-based learning. And Oklahoma, I don't know if you know this, did a play initiative, and it started probably 12-ish years ago, where they really wanted early childhood, pre-K through 2nd grade, to be play-based. And it took a long time for it to gain traction, and they needed pilot classrooms and, all the red tape that everybody goes through to kind of prove their initiative. So in that, though, in that waiting period, Union Public Schools, whom I worked for, went ahead and did their own play-based initiative, and we had what we called the Magic School.
Nice.
It was a strictly 3-year-old program. Everybody in the school was 3. And I went to go observe one of the teachers there. And one of the teachers who ended up being a coworker of mine and one of my very favorite people in the whole world, I sat in a chair in the back of her room and observed her for an entire day, well, up till nap time. And I saw kids in their full capacity, loving school. No one was telling them, sit down, do this, write this. They were engaged and providing information and creating and building and conversing and problem solving, all these wonderful, beautiful things that when you go into education, you hope to bring to the table or the classroom. And they were doing it on their own. And it's all because this teacher provided this magical space of play. And right then I was sold. I dug into what this looks like. I had a major paradigm shift, I should say, and sat down with my assistant teacher and I was like, we're doing this, and if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it like all the way.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where my journey started. And years later I ended up working for fairy dust teaching, which was even a bigger aha moment. Like every time I turned around and heard other early childhood practitioners speak about play, I was like, wow. And yeah, so that was my journey into play-based learning. And I truly felt like play-based learning honored the child.
Mm.
And, if we're talking about children who are created by the most creative God in the world, we know that not all of them are the same.
Right.
And play allows them to be the person God created them to be because they are working in their own abilities, their own gifts, their own talent. And if we just pull ourselves back a little bit, we get to see that unfold in play.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was kind of my journey. And I felt like I could be myself in the classroom when I introduced it. I wasn't having to mold myself to the standards that the school or society was trying to form around the early childhood teacher, classroom, and child. I could be myself and they could be themselves. So that's
Yeah.
where my journey started.
That's a win for both parties.
Yes.
Which is great because a lot of times, when we force something too soon on
Uh-huh.
children, like it's just a hot mess, like they're miserable,
Yes.
they're not happy, we're miserable because they're not doing what we want them to do. And
Right.
I think I learned like, okay, like children will get and develop how they need to when they're ready to.
Yes. Yes.
And they don't have to mold to our timelines and what we think is going to be best. Like
Right.
they're going to do it naturally when they're ready. So that's so good. So tell me, what are some misconceptions about child's play? And like tell us like what the misconceptions are and then like what's actually happening.
Yeah. Hey, misconceptions is like one of the biggest complaints I feel like about play-based learning, whether you're a parent or a teacher. I've done plenty of teacher trainings where I'm giving ideas of what this might look like in a classroom environment. I uh, trained parents in a homeschooling environment. And some of the misconceptions I see are, well, it's so chaotic, there can't be any learning happening if there's unstructured play.
Mm,
Real learning is only happening if a educator or teacher or parent is pouring into the child.
mm,
And I suppose that was a big aha moment in the classroom was I got to like step back and be observer and researcher of the child and realize they are not this empty vessel waiting to be filled with knowledge, but they've come to the table fully whole, whether it's their worst day or our worst day, but they they come to us fully available and authentic in whatever capacity that looks like on any given day.
mhm.
And if I can step back and remove myself as the educator, the person pouring information into the child, we can build on what that child already brought into the learning environment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's a misconception. And then also that it's completely unstructured play. Like unstructured play for a child is like the work of the child. There's so many people that have quoted that, but it, it looks like work if they are engaged. And if it is a mess, I guarantee there is still learning happening.
Mm-hmm.
And um, also, another misconception I found, especially in the classroom, I'm not sure if it happens as much in the home, is that you have permission to set up play invitations. Like it doesn't have to be completely unstructured.
Mm.
I gave myself, as a mom who kept my son home for 2 years in a row before entering formal education, the permission to create yes spaces. And a yes space is basically a space that you create that you don't have to say no to. They can dump, roll, play, build in these spaces. And then afterward, we clean up or we save it or whatever. But it's a space where no doesn't have to happen. Everything there is safe and it's available.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I do think that parents need to give themselves permission to create those spaces where unstructured play is a safe zone, and you
Mm-hmm.
can create those boundaries for
Yeah.
your child.
No,
So,
that's so good. So give us some examples of like what happening when our kids are playing in those, maybe those younger years before age 6 when before they're ready to start their formal lessons. Like what are some things that maybe we're missing that is actually happening as they're playing?
yeah, um, things that when I went through my paradigm shift, I used to only calculate or hold value in some of those academic standards,
Hmm.
but things that really stood out to me when I stepped back as that observer and researcher was there was problem solving happening. There was negotiation and compromise. There was trial and error and cause and effect. All these different core values and skills that we need in order to even enter into academic success. We
Hmm.
need to be able to build on our confidence or independence, all those like we think of them as sub subjects or
Hmm.
um maybe they don't hold as much value, but in my years of experience those hold more value if a child is able to self-regulate through a huge challenge. I think about a baby who's on the floor with cups and bowls around them and they can't reach one, so they have to like work through the challenge of crawling closer to those bowls and grasping and picking up. Those are all building on the skills that they're going to need when they're a teenager and they can't find their book and they're behind on the classroom. Like those self-regulation skills and being able to face challenges with confidence and independence and still believe in yourself are to me invaluable. And those are all the things that are being built in those play moments.
Wow. So that's huge. Those are like pretty great life skills that
Yeah,
they're developing. And it's like great because it's like that stuff doesn't just happen, doesn't
right.
happen
Yeah,
overnight. Like you kind of have to build reps
yes,
into those to gain those skills and to
right.
strengthen them. That's
Yes.
really powerful.
I read something, and man, I wish I had the research to give you right now, but I read something that children are, they like are magnets towards repetitive play. So you could have the same play invitation weeks in a row. They won't get bored of it because the neural pathways are getting stronger and stronger and they find new things to challenge themselves with
Hmm.
or find new ways to create or build. So a lot of the times, like when you see a classroom and they switch out the theme every single week, the children
Hmm.
haven't had enough time to really like root down and build some of those neural pathways that may lend to a creative initiative or creating something new, which is all things the real world would need, but we stifle that by cutting play short.
Wow.
And so I used to leave the exact same stuff out for a month 2 months, and I might add a new thing, or if I noticed in being an observer, notice, oh, that's something that they haven't needed in their play. I'm going to see if they need this item and adding that into their play. So one of those things I put kids like real world items to play with.
Mm-hmm.
And in the kitchen, kitchen play area, I always used to put the real things in there that they might have seen mom play with or dad play with, work with, um, and rulers, measuring tapes, pencils, papers, glasses, all those kind of things that they would see the adults in their life using.
Mm-hmm.
And as an observer, you end up seeing that those things aren't useful to them anymore. We're going to add something else. And then they seem to create something new with their already adjusted view of what those materials should be used as. So I don't know. I feel like it's important to keep trying with the same materials for a while just to see what their brain can come up with.
Yeah, that's so cool. That just probably encourages some parents, like they don't have to get new toys all the time. Like you can
No.
keep the ones that they have, and it is
Yes.
amazing. Like, the creativity that flows when it's like,
Yes.
hey,
Yes.
let's just keep with what we've got. So
I once heard an early childhood practitioner say he liked to refer to himself as the invisible hand. So if he could tell a child in his early childhood program needed a pencil but couldn't quite figure it out, he was the invisible hand that made it available, but never quite entered into their play because he didn't want to interrupt the flow of thinking and
Mhm.
problem solving. I took that on sometimes, like, okay, I may not be slipping them stuff in the middle of class or in the middle of the home, but I certainly could be an invisible hand that made things readily available for them.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so that made me think over break, like we are just now getting back into our
To the
regular
flow.
schooling routine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like today was the first day and I was like, it's been a while. But it's like, okay, I need to kind of like lay out and present some things that my kids maybe have forgotten about. So like I pulled
Yeah.
out some books and some draw books and some like markers and stuff. And I just like laid it out on the counter in the kitchen. And I was like, they just ate it up. And I was like, man, sometimes we do have to kind of create those like you said, invitations.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
they may not, gravitate it naturally themselves, but it's like, hey, you kind of forgot about these great
Yes.
books that you have, and look at all these tools, that you can use to create something. And I was like,
Mhm.
I need to remember that sometimes we can just kind of like create the space or provide the invitation for them and then just let them go.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
exciting.
Play invitation was such a foreign concept to me
Mm.
until I entered the world of fairy dust teaching. And she goes by Wonderlud teaching now too, but she's known as fairy dust teaching. Anyway, Sally introduced that word to me, play invitation. I was like, what a great concept because some kids don't want to play what you want to play, yet we force them to do these things that we think are fun or
Yeah.
cute or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But setting up these play invitations gives them control to say yes
Mm-hmm.
or no to it.
Yeah.
And we know that confidence and self-reliance and all those type of life skills are built through the ability to say yes or no to things.
Yeah.
And that's why I loved that play invitation is such a cool word of I'm inviting you to come into this world and you get the choice of saying yes or no.
Yeah.
Um, but they always say yes because it's just like, oh, you want me? You want me to be a part of your world? Yes.
Yeah.
So they always end up saying yes.
That's really cool. So tell me, what does like play look like as, kids get older? Because I know like you have
Oh,
a 15-year-old. I
yeah,
remember you recently posted a picture because your oldest is 15 and youngest is 7. So there's like a
yeah.
little bit of an age gap there. But you posted a picture of your 15-year-old playing, I think it was like Magnetiles with
Yeah.
like your 7-year-old. And you said they were playing for like an hour. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
tell
It
us
was,
what kind of how that's progressed.
yeah, um, play to me reaches across all languages, age. it's universal, right? Like two children are different ages, they could be speaking two different verbal languages or even developmental languages, yet they somehow all come together in this universal language of play. And um, my 15-year-old, my 7-year-old to go back was like so bored. And I was like, awesome. So I pulled out, it wasn't even like the tiny Legos. It was like the big chunky preschool Legos.
Yeah.
And I was like, we haven't played with these in a long time. Pulled them out, and for an hour, my 15-year-old and my 7-year-old came together. And let me preface, they typically do not get along. Like it is very difficult for us to find common ground
Mm.
between them. My oldest son is very analytical, very, I don't want to put labels on him, but a little OCD, likes things in a certain order,
Hmm.
a certain way, and he is very intelligent. So a lot of the time his ideas are really great ideas, but being able to pass those ideas on to a wild child, 7-year-old, who has the confidence of a T-Rex in the middle of a forest, he is, it's hard for someone with that kind of intelligence to pass those ideas on to a child who is that confident, who thinks his ideas are awesome too, and be
Hmm.
able to get along.
Hmm.
So we've worked through that, but every time they get down to play together, build a fort together, whatever, for some reason, their little brains and their bodies work so well together.
Wow.
And I do think it's this common language of play where you don't learn to compromise and negotiate. Sometimes they're not even saying words to each other to do those things.
Wow.
It's a collaboration that comes together, and it really is. As a mom, I think I posted this when you saw that. It was a good hour of me seeing my boys and thinking, this is what the relationship's meant to be.
Hmm.
And a praying mom, I pray that the moments they share in play start to unfold in their real life
Wow.
as they all get older. I mean, there's going to be times when that's all they're going to have together is maybe a playful spirit. And I hope that that playful spirit carries them into adulthood.
Yeah.
Um, and, most of us feel at peace when we are playing. I don't have a lot of playtime as a mom who's riding and being a taxi car driver and all these things. But my play for me is when I go to yoga and I am in my own space, in my own head, and that is my playtime for now. It used to
Hmm.
be when I could paint or create or do whatever, but for right now, that's my playtime.
Yeah.
Or when we go as a family and we're outside in a creek and I can climb with my kids or discover the cool moss that feels nice to our hands together, that's play.
Yeah.
And for that very small moment of time that we have together, all of our spirits are together at once and we are at peace. And I do think that's the way
Yeah.
God created it to be.
Yeah.
We've just
That's so beautiful.
busied our lives where
Hmm.
we're not slow enough to take those times together. And I don't know why I said that part, but
No, so good, Heather. So good. I know there's one day I took my kids, we just needed to like do something different. And there's like
oh,
a property here in town that like allows you to come for a couple hours and they have like a creek.
and Jinx.
Yes. Yeah. They have
Yes,
a creek running through the back of their property. And like we had the best time. Like
yes,
just it's splashing through the water and we were finding crawdads and like it was just like such a beautiful time. Like we were all
yes,
playing together.
yes,
And so it was just it is a great like connection point and like a
right,
reconnect point.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We actually went there during COVID when they were sectioning out time,
Hmm.
and I cried because I, it was the first time that we had like been together, not in our home,
Hmm.
and it was exactly what you said. We connected, um, we played. It was so open and free, and again, no one was stressed out or like uh, needing to sit and do screen time while we worked on our, you know, distance learning or whatever.
Yeah,
It was a really beautiful time. So beautiful. That's where we chose to take our family pictures 2 years in a row
that's awesome.
because it just brought me back to a very happy place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's really cool. Like, if anyone's ever feeling like family is just not, we're not firing on all cylinders or there's tension, like, I think that is a great, like, reset is just
Yes,
to find some kind of way like that y'all can play together
yes,
and, you know, all get kind of on that same level, same playing field. So whether that's climbing
yeah.
trees
Oh, yes,
or, playing in the sand or whatever that looks like, I think that is such a beautiful
right.
opportunity.
And
Yeah.
as far as like climbing trees goes or risk taking or whatever outside, your kids are still learning in those moments too. So don't ever devalue that. Even if it is just connection, that's enough. But there
Hmm.
is way more happening than the connection part. I
Hmm.
mean, climbing in general is like gross motor skills, core strength, which they need to be able to sit in a chair for periods of time in order to write their bookwork or whatever. They need all that in order to do those things well without getting frustrated and tired and
Hmm.
unfocused.
Hmm.
Um, Climbing trees also helps them like evaluate risk and um, next steps and what happens if I grab the wrong branch. Like there's cause
Yeah.
and effect
Yeah.
and being self aware and environmentally aware. Like all of those things are happening during climbing trees. So don't devalue it. I was even at that Jinx location, my kids took some of those like flat river rocks and they had like blocked off some of the water, but some was still going around and
Yeah.
escaping.
Uh-huh.
So they had to problem solve again, like we need more rocks on this side, or it needs to be this high, or there's a crack right here. So all of that is building knowledge. It's unconventional and it looks
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. I think it's cool because it's like play is like, I feel like it's like the love language of children. Like I just remember like changing a church environment for our children. And I was like, they get it. Like they get that like play and fun is part of the love language of
Yes,
children. And so
yes.
it's really cool that like we're empowered as parents and home educators to speak that language for our
Wow.
children and
Yeah.
to watch them grow and flourish well before we ever sit down to do a writing lesson with them
Yes.
or
That's so
or
good.
math problem is that there's
Yes,
so much that they have
exactly.
already learned. So going back to the quote that or not, I didn't quote it, but I referenced Charlotte Mason's thoughts on waiting till age 6 to start formal lessons. As a former teacher, what do you think about that?
I feel like I'm a walking contradiction on a day. I'm 100% in agreement with that quote. I think that the public education system, including private schools, traditional school,
Hmm.
um, tends to fight battles that don't need to be fought if we were waiting.
Hmm.
Which is dug so deep into play-based learning, I wanted to be an inspiration to other teachers to bring that same honor to the classroom, but I also wanted to honor the kids where they were.
Hmm.
Um, so I do think the education system needs more teachers being play warriors
Hmm.
so that we can offer an environment where we're not hitting ourselves up against a brick wall with behavioral problems that really could be mitigated with developmentally appropriate practices, but more so play. I had a kindergarten friend who was like, I have all these behavioral problems and then they all disappear at the end of the day. And I was like, well, what's happening at the end of the day? And she was like, well, we have 30 minutes of free play. And I said, well, that's your answer to the behavioral problems throughout the day is maybe you need to put some intentional free play throughout the day because a 5-year-old is not meant to sit in a chair all day long. You are going
Hmm.
to get behavioral problems because their bodies are meant to move. We
Mm-hmm.
created a system where we're expecting them to succeed, but the environment is screaming at them, fail, you're failing.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not them that's failing, it's us.
Mm-hmm.
So I always felt like a fish swimming upstream in the education system because I am fully on board with that. I mean, there's countries like Switzerland that don't start formal education until 7 and 8 years old,
Yeah.
and their kids don't struggle through reading. They
Mm-hmm.
start reading because they've had 7 and 8 years of language development, connection on their mom's lap to lap reading, and that love for reading rather than this struggle through reading.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all this research that says that starting reading early has no implications on how they're going to become an avid reader later on.
Wow.
Most kids at age 8 or 9 in the third grade end up reading at exactly the same level, whether they started reading at 3 years old or 7 years old.
Wow.
So I think I read that after I'd had my firstborn, who's 15, and we had put all this pressure on him to be a reader by the time he was at the end of pre-K, and he had learned all his letters and sounds by 18 months, and all this crazy stress that we put on this little human being for no reason at all,
Mm-hmm.
considering he became a reader just the same as every single one of his peers.
Wow.
Um, and I do feel like that had an effect on how he approaches school challenges.
Mm-hmm.
He tends to deal with a little bit of anxiety around not being able to perform the right way or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to our 11-year-old and 7-year-olds who I didn't put those pressures on at all. They read when they were ready,
Mm-hmm.
and they're both pretty confident in themselves when it comes to school.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah. So you're kind of you didn't intend to, but you kind of experimented with your
yes,
children and
a
you
hundred
would
percent.
definitely lean towards when they're ready, they'll get it.
Right? Yep.
Yeah.
And
No,
they do.
yeah.
They do.
Yeah.
I don't
That's good.
know what the science is, except that maybe they were created that way.
Yeah. Well, I think like you said before, and this is something that Charlotte Mason's really big on is just respecting their personhood. And, it's like we can't just force our will on them. I mean, God doesn't do that with us. He doesn't
No.
force his will and his desires on us. He gives us
Hmm.
the choice,
Choice.
and a lot of it just comes down to when we choose to
Hmm.
surrender and submit when we're ready, and so I think there's a lot of that
That's
we can
really good.
glean from and how we choose to parent and to educate our children. So
That's so good.
yeah, that's really good. Okay, so something that I hear a lot of amongst homeschool moms is, they may have, a few children, and
Hmm.
so they may have one that's at the formal age, ready to start lessons, but they've got a brother or sister, that's, hanging out, on the floor playing or whatever. And so what are some advice or tips or trips that you could give them that could help them to make sure that they're still giving great attention and care to the little ones while maybe they're having to give more attention to, a child that they're trying to teach how to read or are reading aloud to them? Like, what are some things you can do when you're kind of juggling more than one student?
Yeah. Well, as far as reading goes, I say include the little ones on that. Pull them up on your lap and read all together. I don't think there's anything more valuable than that. That
Mm-hmm.
that touch that skin to skin reading. But since that's not practical all the time, like
Yeah.
maybe there is book work that you guys are doing. I don't know how your day looks, but and I'm not professing to be a home educator in any sort of way, but I do have some easy things that I can share with you. Preparing the night before is to me essential
Mm-hmm.
because and sometimes you can grab a few things and it's great. But preparing that yes space that I was talking about, maybe it is by the carpet where you're at, or maybe you have um, a, a blanket and that's their border. You naturally can see borders.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's innate. So creating and setting up play invitations on in those yes spaces where you know that you can keep all of your stuff. one of the things I did with Fletcher, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it,
Oh,
our
okay.
youngest, was we had a plastic pool that I
Oh,
would fill sensory stuff in. And
nice.
that was like his gift space. He could make as much mess as he wanted in that space, and it was easy cleanup. But I also I brought some stuff to share with you.
Awesome.
Um, sensory play to me is so multifaceted. So if you're gonna lean into anything when
Mhm.
creating a play invitation, I like to do sensory boxes just because it's concrete that I can plan out and like put in front of them and they can kind of go where they need to with it.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, so I brought a few. One are these like sensory bags, and
Mhm.
this one has paint in it. It's just a plastic bag. It has paint. You can add water to it or gel. And then I just added beads to it. This one has
Okay.
like shapes. That one's a heart. I don't know if you can see it. Some of them have letters on them. And again, you don't, it's just familiarity to these materials,
Mhm.
but this is cold and it's squishy. There's all these different tactile feelings and vocabulary words that you can quickly like add into their play. And a lot of kids can do this independently. So there's that.
That's really cool.
Um, I've collected over the years puffy balls because they don't they're not a choking hazard.
Okay. That's important.
Um, but I've like none of them match because I've collected them over the years. Like maybe we as a family we use some for a project or whatever, and I throw the rest into this bag. And I used them
Mhm.
in my classroom as well as in my home, and they've been multifaceted. So kids, especially young kids, toddler age, go
Mhm.
through play urges, which I don't even know if we want to get into that, but some play urges might be dumping. And a
Mm.
lot of moms are like, "Ah, don't dump the toys, but their body physically needs to do it.
Wow.
It's it's like crawling before you walk.
Mhm.
That dumping is a crawl into cause and effect. If I fill
Wow.
this bucket up and I dump it, what happens? You might get mom's reaction. You Some of the balls might go farther than the other. Like
Mhm.
there's all these little things that are happening in their brain that they're learning cause and effect from just by dumping.
That's really
Um, Another one is transporting. So kids love to fill bags, bowls, all that kind of stuff. And it is a play urge. Like they physically need to do it.
Mhm.
Um, or throwing. So I had a mom one year say, "Oh, I can't get my son to stop throwing things." Well, they need to throw it, so create an invitation where throwing is acceptable.
Yeah.
So buckets, softballs, even these little puff balls, they can like toss into other containers. Like I have these, I don't even know where I got them. Maybe I don't know, they might have held a candle or something at one time. But I keep it because there's all these different things where they can like toss these little balls into them or or they can fill up the small container and pour it into a big container. And I don't know why they like it, but they do.
Wow.
Um, and sometimes it'll keep them occupied for way longer than we think because
Mhm.
we just see, oh, they're throwing balls into the container, but so much more is happening in them.
Yeah.
Um, so those are two things. And then sensory tubs are my favorite. I hope this isn't messing up my sound by moving this stuff, but
Good.
this is just a hefty bin.
Uh-huh.
And I used to have like a scrapbook bin that you keep your paper and stickers and stuff in.
Uh-huh.
One's awesome too because the lid doesn't disappear. And I think I got that for $3 at Hobby Lobby.
Wow.
Um, Anyways, I filled this one up with rice and things that I had in my house. But you can change it out seasonally, put acorns and leaves in it, have them crunch up the leaves,
Oh yeah.
put a mortar and pestle inside of it, and have them crunch up chalk or whatever. But I like this because this is their yes space. This tells
Yeah.
them anything that's happening in here
Uh,
is okay.
yeah.
Um, but to go along with transporting and dumping, I added like a dasher bag. These are like, I think, dressing containers
Oh
and they have
yeah.
lids.
Yeah.
I did a straw. a mason jar. Everyone thinks, oh my gosh, it's glass, it's gonna break. It won't. It won't break. A spoon for scooping and another cup.
Wow.
And let them go at it. See what they
Yeah.
do. But I looked up the word educator, and it's someone who gives instruction.
Mm.
And then I looked up the word researcher, and it's someone who discovers. And so I would just encourage setting this up, maybe not give instruction, but rather be a researcher and discover what they're doing with it. And you'll see a whole lot more learning happening
Wow.
when you open your eyes in that way.
That's
But
really awesome.
anyway, I don't know if does
That's
that help?
great. That's super helpful. I think, yeah, if I had a little one, like that would really help set me up to be like, okay, I have something specific and intentional that, my little one can do and know that so much is happening
Oh,
as
yeah,
we are engaging with these resources that I'm providing for them. Um,
right.
and so it's so great. It's better than giving them a screen and saying, here,
Yes.
go watch
Well,
this.
and don't underestimate pretend play. I mean, get a clipboard from the dollar store and attach a pencil and grab those. They have readers there at the dollar store. Pop the lenses out and have them go find a certain amount. And like if they're older, you could print out pictures of things they need to scavenger hunt for, and they have to make markings or those kind of play invitations. Not only keep them busy, but they are learning at the deepest level when you give them that time and space to
Yeah.
pretend play.
Yeah.
So,
I love it.
yeah.
So good. It's so good. So, guys, there's so much happening when we give our kids space to be children and we give them the freedom to play.
Yes,
There's so
ma'am.
much that's learning and growing. So, don't be like me and think that's a load of crap that, they've got to start early or they're not going to learn. They are really learning so much. So, Heather, thank
Yeah.
you so much for
Oh, I
sharing
love you. I just
your
love you.
love. Yeah, I love you. Thanks for sharing your love and your passion. And I'm excited to get to read your book. And we'll definitely have you back on when it's out so we can talk
I'm
about it
so
some more and
excited.
share it with the world. So
Thank you.
yay! Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I want to remind you that Charlotte says that the only true education is self-education. So even as mamas in our 30s and maybe in our 40s, whatever, we're going to never stop learning. We're never going to stop growing. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a great one.
Bye.